Check, check. Hey, y'all. Welcome. Good evening to everybody. It's so wonderful to see you all here tonight. This is a big, cavernous, strange space. We're Unitarian Universalists. This isn't exactly our vibe. We try to be as warm and communal as possible. And if anyone would feel like coming up just a little bit closer and filling in the space, these chairs up here, the pews over there, you don't have to move if you feel uncomfy, but would love to feel a little closer to one another tonight. My name is Connor Foley. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the Community Church of New York. And we're so excited to be able to be one of the co-sponsors hosting this conversation tonight. The struggle for justice in Palestine is one deeply, deeply close to our community. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. Multiple of my colleagues are there presently. And we have seen our contribution to the liberation struggles we've tried to be allies to as one of intellectual struggle. Throughout the 20th century, so many of the leading lights came through Community Church. We're a 200-year-old congregation. James Baldwin came through, Malcolm X, Nelson Mandela. The list is long. And tonight is another installment in that legacy, as we are so honored to get to host a conversation with our partners, with Sari Bashi tonight. And I want to hand over to my colleague and friend, the Executive Director of the American Council for Judaism, Rabbi Andy Kahn.
Thank you all so much for being here. I'm sure people will continue to kind of trickle in. The weather's probably slowing folks down. I'm Rabbi Andy Kahn, the Executive Director of the American Council for Judaism. Very, very grateful to Connor and the Community Church for hosting us. Also want to thank Jewish Currents, 15th Street monthly meeting of Quakers, and Rabbis for Ceasefire, all co-sponsors of this event. So tonight, we're very honored to welcome Sari Bashi, the author of Upside Down Love. Her book, co-written by her partner, is a memoir that tells her story, an Israeli-American human rights lawyer and ultra-marathoner, and the story of Osama, a pseudonym, a Palestinian professor originally from Gaza, who is living in Ramallah and cannot travel freely. The story of love and struggle across lines of cultural difference, Israeli apartheid, and personal identity provides a window into the human experience of life under extreme political repression in Israel and Palestine. But a bit more about Sari herself. Is it Bashi or Bashi? Bashi. It is Bashi, so it's Sari Bashi. Yes, okay, two different A's. Sari Bashi is an internationally renowned human rights lawyer. She's the former program director of Human Rights Watch, the co-founder of the Israeli human rights organization Gisha, which focuses on freedom of movement for Palestinians in Gaza, and is now the executive director of the Public Committee Against Torture in Israel, as well as a prolific and incredible writer. So here's how tonight will flow. In just a moment, Sari will read an excerpt from her book, and after that, she and I will have a conversation about the book, and then we'll open it up for Q&A from all of you. But for the Q&A, it's going to be a little different than you might expect. We're going to do it by note cards. So as we're in conversation, if you have questions and you want to ask, you can raise your hand, and Connor will bring over a note card and a pen for you to write down a question. And then at around 6:05, 6:10, Connor's going to collect the note cards, sort them a little bit, and then give them to me, and it'll kind of guide the final part of the conversation. Just so you understand why. It's partly practical, but it's also intentional. It helps to make sure that we get kind of a range of voices. It helps group similar questions so we don't get the same question over and over again. And it helps make sure that I know I have the impulse too when given a mic. Sometimes people have a long lead-in to a question, and we're just going to get straight to the questions. And of course, after the Q&A, there will be an opportunity to buy the book, and Sari will be signing them. So thank you again for being here with us this evening. Whether you're here, I don't even know where the camera is. Oh, maybe that one? Whether you're here online or here in person, thank you. And now, Sari.
Is this working?
Try again.
Is this working? No?
There you go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who has braved the terrible snow and sleet to come here today. Thank you for folks who are watching online, and thank you to Connor and to Andy and to the rest of the co-sponsors for hosting me in this beautiful, beautiful space. And I hope we'll have a chance to also ask Andy a bit about the American Council for Judaism. It's a wonderful story about us having forefathers who foresaw the struggles that we would be engaging in today. Upside Down Love is the English translation of a Hebrew language memoir that was published in 2021. It's since been published in Italian and Dutch, and it's a love story about how my Palestinian partner and I met, fell in love, and made it work against the odds and against Israeli law. I'm going to read to you the first chapter and then another part in the book, and the structure of the book is that it's written in two voices. So alternating chapters, alternating between my voice and his. And I just have to give a small shout out to Alice Twombly, my 12th grade English teacher, who taught me how to write. So if you like the book, thank her. If you don't, it's her fault, okay? So this is the first chapter, and it's in my voice. Sari, no movement. I met Osama because he was trapped in the West Bank city of Ramallah. Ramallah was his home and also his prison. Osama was born in the Gaza Strip 2 months after the Israeli occupation began. That explains his name. His father fled to Egypt during the fighting, and so in August 1967, when his mother gave birth, it was up to his uncle to name this baby, whose father was missing because of the military occupation. His uncle chose a strong name. Osama means lion, the animal that no other creature on the savannah can defeat. Because Osama was born in the Gaza Strip, in the Jabalia refugee camp, that is the address listed on his Israeli-approved identification card, even though he moved to Ramallah back in 1985 to study at university, and has lived in that West Bank city continuously for more than 2 decades. The State of Israel does not allow Palestinians to change their addresses from Gaza to the West Bank. My area of legal practice is freedom of movement. In 2005, I co-founded an Israeli human rights organization, Gisha, that provides legal representation to people like Osama, Palestinians, mostly from Gaza, who need permits from the Israeli military to be reunited with family members, reach their jobs or universities, access medical care, or receive professional training. Coincidentally, or not coincidentally, my recreational passion is long-distance running. I'm a prominent female runner in Israel's modest and amateur ultramarathon community. In the early mornings and on weekends, I run for hours through cities, fields, parks, villages, and forests. And I feel a boundless sense of freedom, constrained only by the limits of my body's endurance. During the week, I lead a team of lawyers and advocates who help people like Osama overcome restrictions on their freedom to move and travel. When I met Osama in 2006, he had put off his studies for years. He wanted to advance his career, but his world had shrunk to the streets of Ramallah, surrounded by soldiers. The army's laws didn't permit Osama to stay in Ramallah, and he feared getting stopped at a checkpoint if he were to try to leave. Arrest would mean removal to Gaza with no way back. He sought my help in obtaining permits from the military that would let him leave Ramallah to attend a doctoral study program in London and return to the city on breaks. I submitted a petition to the High Court of Justice and reached an agreement with the state via a friendly lawyer in a hostile system to allow Osama to study in London, visit his home during the course of his studies, and return to Ramallah at the completion of his degree program. At that point, he was to resume being trapped. We were lawyer and client. He was different from any man, Israeli or Palestinian, whom I had ever met. He was quiet, gentle, smart, sensuous. He had strong arms that could hold me, black eyes that looked at the world with curiosity. delicate facial features and a trim goatee, the open, innocent smile of a boy. We knew what we longed for was forbidden, that it could never happen. The more we tried to separate, the more ways we found to stay close. So that's the first chapter. That's the first chapter. And the story goes on in alternating chapters, and I want to read to you now from one of the chapters during a visit that Osama is able to make into Gaza. So part of the army's rules meant that although he lived only 50 miles from where his mother lived, his siblings, his childhood home, he could never travel there, and they could never come to him. So he hadn't been to Gaza in 17 years, until in 2012 an opportunity arose, and he visited Gaza. And I want to read to you an excerpt from this chapter, because it's a Gaza that has been destroyed, but that I hope will be rebuilt. And it's a beautiful Gaza, and this is through his eyes as he returns for the first time in 17 years. This is kind of high. No. Okay. It's a little high. Okay. Okay, so this is his description of going to the beach in Gaza. 7 a.m, the sounds of the sea, seashells, snails, breakfast on the beach. Fishermen casting their nets, trainee lifeguards still drowsy with sleep, people sitting under sun umbrellas, and everywhere, children shouting. Colorful kites fill the air. The hawkers call out, fried sweet potato, hot corn, sweet lupine, sunflower seeds, coffee, tea. I think there were more than 10 people for each square meter of sand. When I looked left and right, I couldn't see the end of the crowds. I had to ask people to let me pass. During the day, the beach is mostly filled with men and teenage boys, and they are shouting. The children on the beach shout each time a wave approaches. As with the falafel in Gaza, which you learn to eat by biting at the sides that aren't too crispy, the children approach the water delicately, letting it wash over them from wave to wave. Mechanized tourist boats take a few passengers on short trips in the sea for 3 shekels each. The Palestinian flag flies next to the FC Barcelona flag. The women swim fully clothed with pants and shirts, covered with a jalabiyeh. Salam, Muhammad's wife, wasn't the only one who kept the veil over her face as she entered the water. People in Gaza were always traditional, but I saw in my family too how their relationship to religion has changed, become stricter. A donkey pulled the Al-Halab ice cream cart while its owner called into the loudspeaker, listen to me, God is one, my friends. Who has lost a child? God forbid, don't leave them alone or forget them like that. Who forgot his change from the 1,000,000 shekels he gave me? For God's sake, let me earn a living. My father will kick me out of the house if I come home with merchandise. Get in line, children, there's enough for everyone to buy, don't worry. We could hear the faraway boom of Israeli warships firing at the fishing boats, but it didn't detract from the determination of the people of Gaza to enjoy the sea that day. One of the children responded to the shelling with a smile, Aqsa, Aqsa, meaning the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, a symbol of Palestinian national aspirations. Hamad, my nephew, was busy observing the warships and the fishermen's response, darting away in small boats to come closer to the shore. The Israeli Navy limits the distance from which fishermen are allowed to fish off the coast. I stayed in the water until 9 p.m. How beautiful the sea is. Memories of childhood, of summer vacations with my grandmother, and the huge steaming dishes of eggplant, tomato, and zucchini, roasted with olive oil and special to Gaza's south, that she used to make for us. I will get reacquainted with Gaza.
Thank you so much. This book is a journey into a lived experience that I can't imagine. Both you and your partner continuing to navigate all of this difficulty, and at some point, as I was reading it, the difficulty became normal. And I think one of the metaphors that's lost in the English translation about that is the way that you two throughout the book, and then I'd imagine in Hebrew it's actually called makluba, right? Yeah. The metaphor of makluba is lost in upside down love, right? Can you share a little bit about how that metaphor functions for you? Because it's a complex dish. And folks here might not really know what it is. So would you mind explaining it and kind of what that meant as a shared metaphor between the two of you while you were going through this entire process that led you to your life now?
Yes, thank you. So the original Hebrew title was Maklube, Upside Down Love, and that's also the Italian and Dutch translation titles. I was told Americans don't like foreign words, so we dropped the Maklube. Maklube in Arabic means upside down. And it's also the name of a traditional Palestinian dish of chicken and rice and vegetables. And when you finish cooking it, you turn the pot over onto a serving plate in order to eat it. And it's a family dish. It's something people make at home. For me, and I think for my partner as well, very important things, both in Palestinian and Israeli society, were upside down. They were not and are not as they should be. And in order for us to create a space where we could be together, where we could get to know each other, where we could try to build our love, we had to turn them right side up. And so that's the upside down part of it. I think also for us, food is a really important part of our relationship and an important theme in the book. As a way of sharing moments together, sharing warmth, sometimes when the outside world can be a little bit more hostile. And then food is also deeply cultural. So in the book, there's actually a recipe for maklube, if you want to make it. And then there are other foods from my own culture as an Iraqi Jew that are also mentioned in the book as a way of kind of exchanging not just of ourselves, but also of our backgrounds.
One of the other recurring themes, and it's funny because it's hard to call it a metaphor because it's a memoir, right? Like you're actually reporting what happened, but the theme of motion and the way in which running plays such a major role in your life, and so many parts of the book running plays such a major role, and as does the difficulty of crossing through checkpoints, crossing over borders. There's this stark contrast between your running, your movement, and Osama's inability to move. Things have changed now. Can you share how that lands with you now, what the differences are now that Osama has a little bit more freedom, and perhaps your life has changed a lot too. You now have 2 children that are like a lot to handle as well. So how has that changed now, this question of motion from where it was in the book?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. So I think for us, one of the biggest challenges was for me to be free when he was not. And particularly when we were getting to know each other, it was a constant source of stress and often distance between the two of us. And I didn't know how to experience my freedom when he was not free. And it almost tore us apart. Things have gotten a little better for him, but overall, I would say my world has also narrowed. Within the book, I write about some of his experiences trying to travel, being turned back, and feeling things were being hemmed in, whereas I also describe my transgressing boundaries through long runs throughout the West Bank, something that at the time I was more easily able to do. I have the blessing and the curse of being able to pass as a lot of different things. I can be who I need to be. And so that gave me the ability to move through different spaces. Particularly in the last few years, everybody has become much more restricted. So within the West Bank, always there were a lot of checkpoints, a wall, travel restrictions, but it's gotten a lot worse. So every Palestinian area in the West Bank, every Palestinian town has a yellow or orange iron gate at the exit of the town that's either open or closed. And more often these days it's closed. So it used to be that if you were here and you wanted to get here, you could do this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And it gets to the point where you're driving an hour and a half to reach something that, could be 15 minutes away. So that everybody is experiencing, including me. So I felt much more constrained. I still run every day, but more inside cities. I don't. The security situation is different, so I don't cross as many boundaries as maybe I was naive, but I'm more cautious now.
Yeah, and now that you're saying that it is interesting. There's a scene where you're running and you're not sure where you are. You get a little lost, and there's this moment where I can't remember if it was settlement security or IDF in a Jeep is like kind of trailing you. And there's this very striking image where at one point at the beginning of your run, you run by a dog that is like barking really viciously and is kind of scary. And then by the time you get back, that dog is like a welcome sight. And now over the past, I think particularly year, but since the beginning of the overt genocide in Gaza, the settlers in the West Bank have become all the more violent and extreme. How has that impinged upon all the different aspects of your life now compared to then? And if I may, like how do you navigate that with children who are both Palestinian and Jewish, and trying that, which is already hard to navigate, but when one of the things they're confronting as Jews are the settlers who are so scary and violent, how do you manage helping them understand that?
I mean, I'm open to suggestions if you have any. For a while, I still occasionally write a blog about raising my kids in the West Bank. It's never what you expect. I think for those of you who are parents, raising kids is never what you expect. And so I think I tried when they were small to give them maybe simple explanations for the world that they saw. So our daughter, when she was small, I would tell her that the soldiers at the checkpoints are having trouble sharing. And so they're not letting everybody through, and that's why Baba, her father, can't come with us to the sea or can't come with us to a restaurant or to a family dinner, and that Ima and Baba think everybody should be able to go through. And that was because Palestinians are not allowed into Israel or even into the Israeli-only areas of the West Bank, but I have an Israeli passport and my kids have my status, so we could travel relatively freely. And then one day when she was about 5, I was taking her and her brother to a memorial service for my uncle in Tel Aviv who passed away. And her father couldn't come with us. And so we're driving, and there was a surprise checkpoint, an unexpected checkpoint kind of sealing off a Palestinian area. So I turned around, and she said, "Ima, why are we turning around?" And I said, "Well, you remember those people at the checkpoint, the ones who are having trouble sharing? Well, they're not letting us through, so we have to go back." And she said, "But Ima, we're Jews." And that was actually the first time I had heard her refer to herself as Jewish. But she did what every 5-year-old does, right? She looked around the world and she saw what was happening in the world, and she pieced together a rule that's actually quite simple and maybe also true. She saw that Jews can and Palestinians can't, and that's why it was confusing for her why we couldn't. And that's kind of the essence of what's going on. I think adults maybe make it more complicated than it needs to be, in that sense. If any of you are parents and you've tried to explain something complex to your kids, you actually sometimes understand it better. Because when you have to break it down to what it is, then that's what it is. So, I mean, that changes. She's an adolescent now, and she's got to make her own way, as does her brother, who's now 8. So, it's a journey for them. And I think, like all parents, I worry that I'm making mistakes.
Yes, that's how we're all so wonderfully complex. All of our parents made mistakes, right? So to that question of legality, there's this moment in the book where you're like steeling yourself to talk to, I think, David, who's a friend and a work partner and stuff, and explain the situation. And you list all of the different laws that you're breaking, in this relationship. And then I think it is the next chapter where Osama talks about how there's no way to actually live legally as a Palestinian because of the ways that that the laws curtail anything you could ever want to do in the West Bank as a Palestinian. How does being a lawyer, so someone very deeply seated in the legal system, affect your sense of what it means to live in a world like this where the laws aren't something that you want to uphold, and in fact you can't, but you're still in part committed to that, and especially with regard to your partner whose mere existence is illegal? How do you square that, and how does that kind of affect your general sense of morality in the world?
Yeah, so in general, Palestinians are not allowed to enter Israel, and Israeli citizens or residents are not allowed to enter Palestinian cities like Ramallah. So it was literally illegal for Osama to join me in Tel Aviv, and illegal for me to join him in Ramallah. So there's that. And I think it heightened our sense of needing to carve out a space that would somehow be extraterritorial, where we could figure it out. But one of the things that you learn as a lawyer doing human rights work in Israel is just the thoroughness of the way in which everything has been, in different ways, declared illegal for Palestinians. So like the level of detail in making sure that laws apply to Jews and Palestinians differently is very, very thorough. And as a lawyer in that system, you kind of, well, what do I do with that, right? Because I want to help people. And you can help people around the margins. In the book, Osama was able to study thanks to a court case, right? So that matters. But the law itself is not something that you have professional pride in upholding. And as a lawyer, what you're actually doing is using the law as a system where if you poke and you're annoying enough, you can maybe you can get a mother reunited with her kid, and maybe somebody can get medical care, and that really matters in the world. But the law is just kind of a maze that has to be navigated for that to work.
On the other side, the more kind of moralistic side, or maybe even like the international legal side, one of the themes that comes up, and that I actually am consistently trying to figure out how to navigate in my work as well, is the question of normalization, right? There are different ways to approach the commitment to BDS as part of a commitment to Palestinian liberation, and depending upon your relationality to the state and to people in the state and all of that, and depending upon how you view normalization, someone might even say having this conversation is normalization, right? And there's this moment in the book as well, in the chunk where you're talking, Osama talks about normalization and you talk about it as well, where you recount I think being in Turkey and being confronted as complicit in Israel's crimes for doing what you were just describing, right? Looking at the legal system, figuring out how to poke and prod it to try to help people, and saying that what you were doing was normalization. And you responded, if I wanted to feel I was in the right, I would have chosen another profession. My profession is dirty. Can you explain what you mean by that, and how and I'm sure that your ideas have developed since then, you feel about the question of normalization and how that can play into and actually harm the quest for Palestinian justice?
Yeah, and Osama also in the book talks a lot about normalization. There's even this part in the book where an Israeli professor who I've asked for help in trying to get him a permit from the defense minister, she writes to him and she says, well, before I help him, I want to know his views on normalization. And he says, I'm in love with an Israeli Jewish woman who wants to have kids, and she wants to know what I think about normalization. so it plays out in lots of different ways. And I think that I don't presume to recommend or suggest how to navigate it outside of Israel-Palestine, because I think it's a very different sphere. But within Israel-Palestine, things are a lot more pragmatic in the sense that, I mean, if I can, as a lawyer, if I can, get a family visit with somebody who's in prison and maybe being tortured, and I can go and at least let him know that his mother's alive and hired me, and then maybe give him just the ability to see a human being who's not a prison guard, and maybe try to put pressure on the prison to stop. I'll do that. Is that going to solve justice in Israel-Palestine? No. Is that important? Yeah. And so I think a lot of it is really about positionality. And I think for me, in my life now, I try to do two things. I try to be kind of like a humble worker bee, and if there's an opportunity to make somebody's life a tiny bit better within a really ugly system, then you do that. That's like God's work, right? But at the same time, also to make sure that I'm also politically engaged at the systemic level, because that's where these big questions of justice and principles may be more important. But when you have an opportunity to help somebody, then you do it.
Great, thank you. I just want to remind everyone, if you have questions, you can raise your hand, and Connor will bring you a note card to write it down, and we're gonna move to that segment in about 5-10 minutes, depending upon how many hands I see. Another piece that you don't center a ton, but I think is really fascinating, is your own family's history and the relationship between being from Iraq, moving to Israel, what that, all of the name changes you talk about, and the name changes that didn't happen. I think there was a moment where some mourning rituals appeared, food, and then there was this moment where you saw through Osama's eyes your own Arabness that had been suppressed, which I think is such another added layer of complexity in this story of so many complex twists and turns and identities. I'd love to hear you talk about how that has developed for you, because not only you're Iraqi Jewish, you're American, you're Israeli, you're living in Palestine, so many complicated identities in one, and how that part of your identity has developed for you, particularly living in a primarily Arab environment.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And there's actually a really a wonderful book by a journalist named Masoud Hayyoun called When We Were Arabs. And it's about his family's North African. It's a memoir about how his family stopped being Arab, which is a very familiar story for Arab Jews. So one of the things that was and is, I would say, powerful about my relationship with Osama was this constant journey of discovery, not only of each other's backgrounds and cultures, but also of our own, because we would see it through each other's eyes. So my family is from Iraq, and in Israel, those identities have been very carefully constructed. So, and I think also in the United States as well. So I think Jewishness is often associated with Europeanness. And then for Arab Jews, the two words that are most commonly used are Sephardic, which means Spanish, or Mizrahi, which means Eastern. And there are reasons why those phrases have validity, but it's a way of stripping the Arabness out of Arab Jews. And that was part of what the Zionist project did. It assigned people different roles. There's a kind of a funny story. My aunt, who's from Basra in Iraq, when I told her that I was moving in with Osama, and I didn't know what question to get, because I'm telling my aunt that I'm gonna, I have a Palestinian Muslim boyfriend, and so she pauses for a minute, and then she says, I say he's Palestinian, and she says, is he Arab or Christian? I'm like, I didn't know how to answer that question, because she, as an Arab Jew, had been taught that Arab is Muslim, and Christian is European, and so she wanted to know which one he was in a way that didn't make any sense. But one of the really wonderful things about meeting Osama and seeing my family through his eyes was discovering the Arabness that was hiding behind phrases like Spanish and Eastern. And so he would sometimes look at family pictures and of my father and be like, that's an Arab guy. Or there was once one of the rare times he got a permit, and he actually came to my uncle and aunt's home and tried to speak to them. They were speaking the kind of Iraqi Arabic, Jewish Arabic that they'd spoken like 70 years ago, and he was speaking Palestinian dialect Arabic, and they couldn't understand each other, but they were trying really hard, and then they finally switched to Hebrew. But it was a beautiful journey of discovery for me, and I think for him as well, because he connected with Hebrew through me.
One of the other threads that gets picked up now and then is Osama's irreligiosity. And I wonder, how has that developed now? Because there is like, there's a moment in the book where you bring kosher and halal chicken home, and he doesn't want to eat it because he doesn't want anything to do with anything that has to do with God, which I thought was hysterical. I loved it. But how has that changed now that you're also raising kids? Is there more of a desire for him to impart what he was brought up with? Does he want to there's so many scenes in the book as well. He's a professor and is teaching children who are they're not children, they're college kids, but kind of children. They're mostly Muslim, and he's teaching science, and there's this constant back and forth with these kids that's just it's amazing to read. And I wonder how if it's changed at all for him now that they're his kids as well, and how you've navigated the complexity or not complexity, in fact, of both Jewish religion and whatever Muslim aspects he has chosen to bring in.
Well, Osama keeps a really good kosher kitchen. I think it's the only Ramallah-based kosher kitchen, and like if I put like a dairy spoon in the meat cutlery drawer by mistake, he loves it. He gets so excited that he can point out that I made a mistake. So, he's been very flexible. I mean, look, I think, neither of us are religious people, and both of us are outsiders, and I'm not sure that we could have made it work had we not been outsiders, because I think it was easier for us to kind of resist societal pressure because we were already on the outside. And so, that's freeing and also sometimes a little hard. But no, he hasn't become more religious. I think, the kids go to a school where part of the Palestinian curriculum is mandatory religion classes. And they have a Muslim curriculum and a Christian curriculum, and their Jewish curriculum is not very good. So the kids, study Islam in school, so they get a lot of it. And they get a version of Islam that would not be the version that I or Osama would teach them. It's a very kind of conservative, kind of rote memorization system in many ways. I'm happy that they're learning that. And they know some Jewish traditions from me. I do kind of more traditional Judaism, including keeping a kosher home. But I think for them, they have to figure it out. They can be whoever they want to be, and unsurprisingly, growing up where they are right now, Islam is much more dominant for them.
Yeah, getting both of those things too is such a gift, right? Because depending upon who they are inside, they'll grow and be drawn to one or the other or a mix of both, and that kind of freedom is incredible. So it's a wonderful gift you're giving them. We're going to move to questions from the folks out here in just a second. I have one last question, and it's two questions in one, which is the complexity of this book is that it really is two things woven together. It's a memoir, and it's very personal and very touching and vulnerable. And I have to say, it feels like a little surreal to be in conversation with you after having just read this, because I feel I know so much. But then there is so much. I think politics is the wrong word. It's just the reality becomes so stark of what the Israeli government's impact is upon Palestine and Palestinians throughout this book. And it would be easy, I think, for people to perhaps read it and only get the love story, or read it and only get the political side of it. How do you hope readers engage? What do you hope they take away from it? And as you were putting it out, what did you worry that they might take away from it that you didn't intend?
Yeah, I mean, when I was writing it, I didn't know, it was my first book, and I didn't know how to do it. And I got a really good piece of advice from a journalist friend of mine, which was basically just stick to the facts. And so I tried as hard as I could to write what I heard, what I saw, what I tasted, what I touched. If you read the book, you get a sense of what I think, but I tried to avoid drawing conclusions for people, just to kind of let people see that world. And actually, one of the most satisfying pieces of feedback that I got about the Hebrew edition was from an Israeli guy who wrote to me, and he said, "I read your book. I disagreed with a lot of what you said. A lot of what you said made me angry, but you showed me something that I hadn't seen, and thank you." And so that I think is what I want people to get out of it. It's to see something that they haven't seen. It's almost like I think this is particularly strong for Israeli readers because it's a context that's so familiar, but it's from the other side. Beyond that, I would say that I worry that people will hear about an Israeli-Palestinian love story and have the message of, oh, you see, we can all get along and make peace and it's all good. And that's actually not the way I see things. And what I hope the book says beyond the personal story is that the people in Israel-Palestine are human beings. I hope that everybody in the book is a human being, is portrayed as a human, even the people who are doing really terrible things. And the situation in Israel-Palestine is not the way it is because Israelis and Palestinians are somehow biblically ordained to be in some tribal conflict. Like, that's not what's happening. There's a system that is oppressing people, and there's a system of unchecked power. And I don't know a lot of people who, when given the opportunity to abuse power, will turn it down. So it's not tribal, it's not personal, it's a system that needs to be changed. And when we change the system, then we can create space for people to live differently. So it's not a message of let's make peace through love. It's about co-resistance, but the love has to be there. Because, my victory and Osama's victory was being able to carve out a space where we could just be ordinary lovers, flawed and sometimes perfect and just, figure things out like two ordinary people. And that was a huge victory, because that was shaking off all of the taboos and all of the societal expectations. And to some extent, that's what we need to do. We just need to kind of shake off all of these Palestinians, Jews, and just say, there's a system, it's oppressing people, and we all need to be part of transforming it.
Beautiful, thank you. And I will say, having read it, the heart you have for all of the people in it, even just as you're describing the soldiers at the checkpoints that are creating these bottlenecks and being gruff, like, I could read in it the compassion you had for even them having to do it, so you're an incredibly remarkable person for the amount of love and care you have in your heart, along with the unbelievable tenacity to continue this fight in the face of so much struggle, both personal and on behalf of other people. I did say that was going to be the last question. I have one more, which is obviously this was written before the overt genocide began in Gaza. How has that affected you, your family, your work? If I can even ask you to answer that question in this span of time, because it's in reading it now, that's in the background that hasn't happened yet, and it's going to happen. So I'd love to hear maybe just a little bit of a reflection on, beyond the fact that the West Bank has been locked down, what other things have changed for you.
Yeah, and that scene that I read at the beginning of Osama's visit to Gaza, I'm aware that it's a beautiful, beautiful Gaza that we need to rebuild, because it doesn't exist like that right now. Look, the war was, it was hell for everybody. And, for Osama, his whole family is in Gaza. And so he was just, really beside himself. I wrote about this in an essay that appeared in the Modern Love section of the New York Times, what it was like to try to love somebody and reach somebody who is feeling that much pain. And I think for a lot of people with family in Gaza, and even people who just, are human and look at what's happening, it was, for him, he felt guilt for being alive, for having food, for being safe, And I actually think that there were a lot of people who had that reaction. And maybe also a guilt for not stopping it, right? For not being able to stop it. And it's been hard. It's been hard for him, it's been hard for the kids. Kids pick up on stuff. And, my younger one especially, he exhibits fears. I think for a lot of people in the region, it's been a difficult time, and it's not over. It's not over. So.
Thank you. Do we have some questions? Great, thank you. I'm reading them all so I can try to maybe combine them a little bit. It's actually impossible to combine these. These are very good questions. Thank you. I think you just spoke to this a little bit. But are you ever fearful for your children and partner in the West Bank just living?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of dangers. So, not that long ago, I was taking my kids and another kid to a water park. And the parts that are dangerous in the West Bank are the seam areas. Inside the cities, it can sometimes be safer, but going on roads that are common to Palestinians and Israeli settlers or close to settlements can be a challenge. So I'm driving with these kids, including one who's not my own, and there are cars stopped. And the cars are stopped because some people from the settlements are throwing rocks at Palestinian cars on the road. And so, yes, I was afraid a rock was going to hit my kid, or maybe even worse, the neighbor's kid. And then, beyond that, I think, my kids are resilient, but they have to navigate a mixed identity under circumstances that are really like a pressure cooker, where they're constantly being told those two identities don't come together. And so I also worry about, their psychosocial well-being, as well as their fears. They're not stupid. There's a story, my daughter is good. My daughter is older, she's 11, and my son is 8. This was a couple years ago, kind of at the start of the war, where I was driving with both of them in the car, and my son starts to cry. And he says, I'm afraid the Israeli military is going to kill me. What do I say to that? So luckily, while I'm trying to devise an answer, my daughter pops in, I think she was 9 or 10 at the time. And she says, the Israeli army doesn't just kill children like that. And this was during the war in Gaza. So then she stopped and she corrected herself. And she said, well, they do in Gaza, but you're in the West Bank, and so you're fine. And the truth is, that was really reassuring, right? It was credible because it didn't come from me. It came from another kid. And it was actually kind of accurate, right? So those are the fears I have for my kids.
That hit me. So when you've experienced folks in your life or external disapproving of your marriage, is it usually on religious terms, racial terms, or in some other way?
Religious and racial, I would say. Some people just don't think Jews should be with Muslims and Muslims should be with Jews. And then there's also a lot of racism, on both sides, specific to Palestinians and Jews. So.
Can you speak at all about translation issues with the book? It's now, how many languages is this now? Like 5, 6?
This is the fourth, and Spanish
okay.
should come out as the 5th language in 2 months.
Nice. How has that been possible, and what has that been like for you to navigate?
I mean, it's been wonderful. So I actually translated the Hebrew into English a while ago, but it took a while to sell it to the U.S. market. And in the meantime, in Europe, they translated from the English into Dutch and Italian, and now into Spanish as well. But in advance of kind of turning it over for foreign translations, I did some adaptations and revisions to try to make it more accessible to foreign readers. And I think for Israelis, one of the reasons that I think it worked is that it was a world they knew so well, but from a different perspective. And for foreign readers, I had to do more work to just kind of introduce them to that world. But I can say in Italy, I did a book tour in Italy in October, and it was amazing. People, there's a lot of solidarity with Gaza. This was during the war as well in Italy. And people just really connected with it from a very human point of view.
How much time do we have? We'll see if we have enough time for this one. And also, if you want to say I don't know, then I'm not going to push it. Which is, can the two-state solution be implemented, and or do we have to move towards a one-state solution?
So, I mean, I can say my experience, right? I live in one state. I don't know where you want to tell me one begins and the other ends. I live in one state, and I live with Palestinians, and Palestinians are living with Jews. we're just living badly together, right? Really badly together. And so my hope would be that we could just live better. So I personally believe in and am working toward, together with others, to bring about a single democratic state. It shouldn't be so counterintuitive, one person, one vote. But I have deep respect for people who are pursuing a rights-respecting approach to a two-state solution. I would just really query on the rights-respecting part of it, including the right to return. Because I think sometimes when people talk about a two-state solution, they mean a two-state solution that perpetuates not allowing Palestinian refugees their legal right to return, and that's where things get a little messy. How are your kids accepted in school? Do their classmates know that they're Jews? Do they respond to that? How does that work? So, I mean, we spoke to the school at the beginning, and that's actually something that's evolved in the way that I live in the West Bank. I think in the beginning I tried to keep a low profile, and then after my daughter was born, I stopped trying to keep a low profile, and I didn't want her to be ashamed of who she is, and so I started to tell people. Probably just get it over with. Like, let's move on now, please. And so we wanted our kids to be okay in school. So we did talk to the school, and everybody knows. But also in Palestine, like many societies, there's a strong element of patriarchy. So they're often considered their father's child. Even the way that the names you use. So in the US, many children take their father's last names and not their mother's last names. In Palestine, not only do they take the father's last names, but they also name their fathers and grandfathers' first names. So your name, you have 4 names. You have your personal name, your father's personal name, your grandfather's personal name, and your father's last name. So the father is very present there, and that's easier. It's easier for my kids, but people know who I am, and I think that there's an understanding that my kid's mother is okay, whatever they think about Jews or Israelis. That for the most part, that I'm okay.
Who was the target audience for the book originally, and has that changed as it has been released more broadly? And I mean, this is answered in the book, but why did you write it?
Yeah. So, I mean, the target audience was actually Israeli and Palestinian readers. And I hoped that my voice in the book would be a bridge for Israeli readers to be able to hear Osama's voice, and that his voice would be a bridge for Palestinian readers to be able to hear my voice. It hasn't yet been published in Arabic, so there's a piece that we haven't yet done. But I wanted Israeli readers to see what life is like for Palestinians. And I know that many Israeli readers don't choose to read about the occupation or to read about what their government is doing. And so what I hoped was that kind of an interesting love story would just draw people in, and then along the way they would also see something else. I think that and that both Israeli and Palestinian readers would just see the characters as human and be curious about who these characters are. Sometimes I think when you read about Israelis and Palestinians, they're stereotypes. One is demonized, one is made into a saint, and that's just not the way any people are. I think with the translations, first of all, time has passed. And I think that if it were published now in Hebrew, the reception would be more difficult. Just because of where Israeli society is right now. And publishing it in Arabic is complicated right now as well. But for foreign readers, I hope that it's an opportunity to see a different side of Israel-Palestine. And there's so much energy and interest around Gaza, around what's going on, but there's also a fair amount of ideological rigidity and litmus tests. And I just want people to see that things are a little more nuanced.
And what's next? I know you have your blog. Is that going to lead into a book that continues the story? Do you have a dream book you want to write, or was this enough and you're like, I'm done?
Well, this was definitely enough. I also have a full-time job, yeah. And I'm a mom. But I'm developing an idea that would be based in part on family history, mine and Osama's. Because both of our families were, for a very long time, historically, living in the Levant, living in the Middle East, Ottoman subjects. And their lives took very different turns. And the events of 1948 exiled both of our families from their homes in very different ways. And so I've been interviewing Osama's mother and my father to get some more kind of material. But I think I would have to somehow weave that all into my daughter because she's the present, but also maybe the future. So that could be a way of telling a different narrative.
Oh, you have to quit your job and just write that because I want to read it. That sounds incredible. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And not just for being here, thank you for being here, the incredible work that you have continued to do, the fact that you founded Gisha that has been so important in this moment in particular, in spite of so many difficulties of it, its functioning, the work you're doing to end torture. You are a truly, you're a tzadikah, 110%. And it's an honor to be here with you. And thank you for writing this book for all of us.
Thank you so much for hosting me. And thank you for braving this weather and coming tonight. Thank you.
The book comes out on the 20th, but there are copies here to buy now, and if you buy them now, Sari will be signing them. So please do.